doors open, kids find a safe space. That three gaming doc fights the grind each day. From the joystick low to the streets ballet. She's the voice that echoes the restless hum. Hardcore hero where the city drums. And dreams are bred. The city roars, but her wheels still roll. Streaming at night with a fierce heart soul. That three gaming dog fights the grind each day. From the joystick low to the streets ballet. She's the voice that echoes the restless hum. Hardcore hero where the city drums. Cheer when her streams go live. Green glow shining, she makes them thrive. Kids in the morning don't see her night. She hides battles fought by screens, strange light. Driving their futures down bustling streets, filling small lives with the simple beats. She carries their dreams while chasing her own. Walking roads never leave her alone. Cali where the sun went red. Found a home where chaos and dreams are bred. The city roars, but her wheels still roll. Streaming at night with her fierce heart soul. They laugh, they cheer when her streams go live. Green glow shining, she makes them thrive. Kids in the morning don't see her night. She hides battles fought by screens, strange light. Driving their futures down bustling streets, filling small lives with the simple beats. She carries their dreams while chasing her own. Winding roads never leave her alone.
Well, greetings, gamers. This is Dr. Eileen, the gaming doc, the driving doc, and this is your place and your space to laugh, to chat, to chill, to hang out, to take a moment, to take a break, to take a breath, and enjoy a power hour. And we must start off with honoring our first three across the gate, coming in for the gold, our scion of scouting, she who, it says, last seen playing RV there yet? It's about RVs. I need to know about this game. Tell me about it. Coming in for the silver, we have the one who brings in the southbound end of a northbound unicorn, and it's raining beans. Hallelujah. Kimmy Beans Art. And coming in for the bronze, my absolute, and for someone with the bronze, this is my eagle of iron. Iron Eagle. Alrighty, champions, please, just like at the Olympics, take your places on your risers, wrap yourselves in your national flags as we play your national anthems. The pain in the butt. That would involve proctology. Sam! Oh, Rella is here. Hey, Eileen, it's good to see you again. Good to see you too, sweetheart. Hello. And much love to the entire system. Hi there. Dr. Mythos, who is, it's no mystery. See, everybody gets a nickname. I'm still playing with yours. There is no mystery that Dr. Mythos is absolutely amazing, absolutely awesome, and number one. Salutations to you too, my friend. And it is always just so fun to come in and check in. And, it really is weird for me to only stream for like an hour. And when I first thought about it, it's like, well, I only have an hour. But then I thought to myself, an hour's better than nothing. An hour is time for us to be able to check in with folks and just to say hi and to have that little bit of connection, because I do miss the old days. Some of you have been around long enough to remember the old days where pretty much every morning during the week I was streaming from my cabin, and now that my schedules have changed, but that's okay. And here we're coming in with my absolutely favorite toxin venomous XIII 13, and who injects with both fangs absolute good vibes and good feelings every single time. What's the word, Doc? The word is lunch. HR is only one boomer rant. That is true, Venomous. That is. Guess what? What? I made it downstairs and back up. Oh my goodness gracious, great balls of fire. Okay, for Kimmy Beans, making it up and down the stairs, we celebrate, we dance. Kimmy Beans, art is awesome. Yes. That is absolutely Love Train worthy. Doc's Power Hour. Follower age, yes. 4 years, 189 days. Heck yeah. We'll be taking over for a while because I feel like it's best when I'm here so things can be well managed as Sam is in that time of day. You know what? We're always happy to have the system here, and it's always a delight to have you come in and fill us in on the 411 and how things are going. And all the hearts with venomous. So you go, okay, we got hearts, hot pin 6 love, and I Icum heart. Y'all have these terms I don't understand, but it's cool and it's cute. This beats waiting all the way until Sunday. I remember and miss the cabin. Oh, sweetheart. There are times when I miss the cabin too. Although Staten Island is probably the closest thing to Boulder Creek that New York has, except for upstate New York. Upstate New York is absolutely beautiful and it's very woody and very rural. But Staten Island, I mean, it's got trees, it's got rivers, it's got animals everywhere. And there's a certain point in the evening or late afternoon when it smells like burnt toast, and I don't know why. Why does Staten Island smell like burnt toast specifically in the evening? I don't know. My mountain never smelled like burnt toast. Good work. I hope it wasn't too painful. I'm so happy. Yes, I'll share the Steam page in your Discord. Thank you. Oh, what's this one? So Shelven. It looks like, I mean, to me, it looks like Slimer from the old Ghostbusters cartoon. I've been having him out. Yes. Mostly feeling groggy cause of periods apart from that, all okay with us. You know what? Sometimes you just need to rest. You mean Boulder Creek, Colorado? No, Boulder Creek, California. Boulder Creek, that was the city I lived in. Although technically it did not actually count as a town. It wasn't big enough to be considered a town, but it was home. Nope, it's not that painful today either. My goal is to shower later. I'm so much better each day, it seems. Yes. Hashtag blame Jay. What are we blaming Jay for? Well, not only did they pull one tooth on Monday, but 2 teeth. Oh, sweetie. Oh, the teeth. And this too shall pass, and clove oil is awesome. Using some of that, like the, what is it? Ambisol, I think. The stuff that you put on babies' mouths for teething. It's tooth stuff is just rough. Mr. Harmless 411. I've been watching WW2 history videos And I hate the impartial Japanese. They sound like horrible, horrible people. You know what? It is rough. It is very rough. And, and very proud of you for looking at historical things. The old saying, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it, and that's not just in school. And the thing is that, when you look at different things about pieces of our history, and then it's like, when the Japanese were interred here in the United States, I mean, they were literally rounded up. And there were some of the families had sons who were actually fighting on the US side, but they were rounded up. They were put into camps with barbed wire and everything. All of their stuff was taken away from them. And and they never got it back. The government just basically went in and stole all their stuff. And there were like family heirlooms that were taken, but yeah, they got packed up, put in the backs of trucks, entire families, the elderly, children. And the Japanese internment camps that were here in the United States, those were real. And the thing was is that often there were also anybody who looked Asian was usually rounded up. So you had people who weren't even Japanese that were rounded up and put in there. And like I said, their property was claimed by the United States government, and they never got it back, and many of them died there. And they weren't living under the best of conditions. And if you looked at the pictures and stuff, very similar looking to the camps that were in Germany. And so there is like all these different pieces, but make sure, and I'm really, like I said, I'm really proud of you for looking into it, because looking at history from that perspective. And when that was going on, my parents were alive. And it was, it's just, the war was just such, I mean, war in general is such a horrific thing. And to me, it seems so pointless, because you just end up with a whole lot of people dead. And being able to look back on things historically, it gives us a perspective on what was the mindset in that moment. During the McCarthy trials, where anybody, people were encouraged to rat out their neighbors because they might be communist. And, they were taken out, in some cases, dragged out and beaten. And at different points, it's always interesting to me to see the power that fear can create. When people get afraid, something takes over. It's like, when people, go into mob mentality, and they stop being individual beings, and they just run out and they loot and they set things on fire. I mean, and okay, I understand when there's social upheaval, but when a sports team either wins or loses, I mean, the fact that in an otherwise sane society, people were destroying school buses because they were all hyped up about their team. And there were cities where school buses were destroyed. I mean, the way that kids are able to get to school, and they didn't even, hesitate. It was like, oh, there's something we can destroy. That is a part of the human nature that I find very interesting. Because the next day, when you talk to people, and it's like suddenly everybody calms down. It's like, all of a sudden it's the purge. Let's see. Boulder Creek, California smelled like weed back in the day. Sustained. Now it smells like armpits and sadness. No. Boulder Creek, California smelled like trees, and well, a lot like skunk. There was a lot of skunk there. And when they would have like festivals and stuff, and they would shut down the main part of the street, and now you had to get home, like on Halloween, you had to get home before they closed down the street, because there weren't many places that kids could walk safely, because most of the areas didn't have sidewalks, and there were no lights. So they would shut down. Basically, there was only one main street to the town, and they would close it off to traffic, and the kids would trick or treat from one shop to the next, and they had face painting, and they had entertainers. And I mean, yes, it was inconvenient if you got there late and you had to, leave your car parked on the road up the mountain. But there was something so cool about it that, when things would happen in that community, it was, I mean, everybody got involved. They would have at the volunteer fire station. I mean, we didn't have a police department or anything, and our fire station was volunteer. They would have a the harvest dance, and people would, and I mean, you'd hear people talking about it. It's like, oh, what are you wearing? Oh, I'm getting my hair done, and it was such a big deal. So, but yes, Boulder Creek will always be very near and dear to my heart. And honestly, it did not smell as much like weed. Mostly it smelled like weed because there were skunks. Had to go to the doctors for a blood test. Still don't like needle. Oh, I hear you. I hear you, sweetie. And that is one of the greatest ways to really find out what's going on. I had to go to the office on Tuesday yesterday, and man, I was miserable. Oh, I'm so sorry. My neck popped through and scared me bad, but I'm not feeling like anything bad came from it. I know it's normal to pop without meaning to after surgery like that. I heard about 7 different spots simultaneously. I screamed. Yeah, and one of the things, it's like, okay, what makes the pop is a buildup of gases in the joints, like, when you pop a knuckle. The sound, oh, no sound. There we go. That sound is the release of gases. Now, after you've been under anesthesia, because part of it is, they use gases for part of it, and those gases don't disperse very easily. So sometimes they'll build up in the joints, and then you'll have what we call an audible, or the doctor word for it is a cavitation. So, but yeah, I mean, and the theory in chiropractic always was, if it pops and it doesn't hurt, it's a good pop. We basically have that now. Yes. I only heard it's rough and then ads. Ah. Well, you can rewind through it. War has essentially always been pointless, but it's always the never-ending quest to conquer others. I mean, yeah, and it really is, the question of what is ultimately the motivation? What is that line where diplomacy is not an option? And in most cases, it really comes down to, we've got to get them before they get us. And being able to, because, and the key thing to that is to forget that people are people, people are individuals, that a group or a nation does not represent what each and every individual wants, needs. I mean, most people want to just be safe, not be hungry, to watch their children be able to grow safely, and to grow old together. And it really is a tough thing because, are there times when a war is necessary? Yeah, I guess, that being based on the best that people know to do at that time. And, and as they say, history is written by the winners. And, depending on who won, that story could sway significantly from, from what really went on, and what the average everyday people, because they were the ones who really suffered. It was like, and of course the horrific loss in the military, and both my parents had been in the military. So that was a reality. I grew up with the reality that anytime my dad left to go overseas, I might never see him again. And, there's to me, that there's kind of a romanticizing of war. And that was something that was like, for generations. And then they started making movies that really focused, movies like Apocalypse Now, Full Metal Jacket, uh, Good Morning Vietnam. And, it's that started bringing in the humanity cost of it. And, it's just interesting, having grown up, I grew up in the era where, the whole idea was, you know, a nation was bad and evil until they weren't, until somehow they became allies, until somehow, oh, well, there's somebody we dislike more and they dislike them too. So, diplomacy is a very weird thing. And, it is, it's a very interesting study to look at, if we take like the emotional pieces out of it and kind of study it as events that happened and the impact that they had. And did the war ultimately achieve long term what the goals of it were? And even then, what were the goals of it? The idea that it's like at the time, in most cases, it's either they did something to us, so we're going to do something worse back, or we're afraid they're going to do something to us, so we're going to attack preemptively. I mean, yes, there was the Civil War, which had a horrific death toll. Literally brothers against brothers, family against family. And, the long-term settling, when the dust settled, it wasn't like the situation for the slaves was that much better. So, it is interesting. I also called someone's pocket nymph yesterday. She said that she was going to call me, that because she said I seemed shy at first, and then I opened my mouth and I'm loud. Oh, but you're adorable. Fear is a powerful thing. It is. I feel bad, the innocent people, but they were horrible people over there. Thanks to Pearl Harbor. Yep. I mean, and the thing is that looking back at the decisions, the one on top of the other on top of the other, leading to the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it's like the idea that tons of people want Japan and Nazis dead and innocent stuff. It really is. But and the thing is that when you look at the idea that it's like, okay, Pearl Harbor happened and it was a military target. Hiroshima and Nagasaki happened, and they specifically targeted civilians, people who had nothing to do with it. And, it is, it really is, because when we think of, my mom had a very dear friend who was German. And how many times she had people who, as soon as they heard her accent, they accused her of being a Nazi, which she wasn't. She was never supporting that. But, and she would talk about the fact that she would get threatened just because she spoke with a German accent, because not all Germans supported that. And when we look at a nation, or even a segment of a nation, it's not even the whole nation, and, decide, well, they're all alike. And, and you see this a lot in the Native American communities who still have significant issues with, you know, people who are not them, and, like the things that happen between them and, the white settlers and the white military and all of that stuff. And there are those who to this day swear it's like, no, you cannot trust them. Look at them. You cannot trust them. And I've observed that, and the wounding that happens. I mean, honestly, I do not know of any culture that has an absolutely clean history. The thing is, for me, It's about what do we learn from these moments and how can we take the positive message into the future, and when we fall for the idea of, it's like, well, everybody who looks like this or who comes from this country or whatever, they're bad. And, and it's like, well, things that are done, and like I said, nobody comes across free. There's been a lot of stuff that I think every nation that I know of has some stuff that it was like, no, that wasn't cool. That was not okay. And to this day, there are things that, go on and are just horrific. So, being able to look and also keeping in mind their perspective was very limited because they, each country at that time, the only information they got was what they themselves produced, what that nation told them, what that nation allowed them to know. The Germans only heard German, you know, propaganda. US only heard US propaganda. Japan only heard Japanese propaganda. The really cool thing now is that because of the interwebs, we can actually find out what the truth is. We can actually see the daily lives of people outside of this. We are not limited to what we are told and the opinion that we are told to have. And if you don't have that opinion, well, you were going to get bad things. Back in those days, even growing up in the 60s, freedom of speech, which most people really don't understand, freedom of speech does not mean freedom of consequences. And all it means is technically the government can't go after you. Other people can. Other people can make your life a living horror because freedom of speech only applies to the government limiting. And so, it's like, yep, there are consequences. And the thing is that when we can actually get into discussions about it, when we can figure out, okay, what was really going on behind the scenes. And there were a lot of, people who supported the fact, right here in the US that that the government knew that Pearl Harbor was going to be attacked. They were warned. And they let it happen anyway because they knew that would guarantee the US get the American people supporting going into the war. Do I know for a fact that that's true? No. It is opinions that have been stated. I mean, granted, it does make a weird kind of sense. But the idea that that would have been allowed in order to make sure, because the American people were not keen on the idea of going into war. But that happened. And then suddenly everybody was keen on it. And I seriously hope that it's not true that people in the government would have allowed all of those people to die because they knew ultimately it would serve their purpose of getting the United States fired up enough. They needed something to fire everybody up enough to make people want to go into the war, where the American people before then were voting against it. So, is that true? I don't know. I hope not. It does kind of make sense. Let's see. Lol, I love you, Doc. Love you too, Venomous. We need 2-hour streams. Doc is pulling one arm while the palm is up, is the opposite side. Good for the. Oh, is pulling one arm up while the palm is up. Well, oh, like pulling one uh is the opposite side good for the shoulders? It can be. What I would do before you do that though is do some shoulder rolls. Roll it like a few times forward, a few times back, then go into the stretch, go into like a partial stretch, and then, go into that. Do cross stretches. These are really, really good. Where you just bring your arm out, kind of brace it just above the elbow, and bring it across. Um, Putting your hand up against the wall and then using your fingers to crawl up the wall to see how high you can bring it. But yeah, motion is usually good. All civilizations have had some form of conquering. Oh, yeah. I'm so pleased with my progress. Yes, I'm not even pushing myself hard. I just listen to my body. You are doing amazing. One guy I heard of felt bad for the war and visited Japan and said they were great people and it was really beautiful there. Everybody who I know who has been there, my husband, he spent time there and it was amazing. And the thing is that it's a place that has such a historical significance, and there's a restraint that is there. Plus, I mean, it's weird because it's like there's the aspect of it that is very restrained, very controlled, very, the social norms are very, very important. Honor is very, very important. And then you've got the crazy anime, like wildness. So it's almost like, it has these extremes, but somehow they balance out, which is very weird. That lost yesterday, yeah, because like, bro, who do you think you're killing our people? Uh, what lost yesterday? It is, I meant the opposite. Oh, okay. Goals also are always changing depending on the result. That is venomous. Please put that in inspiring thoughts because that spitting straight truth. Goals also are always changing depending on the results. In power systems, a handful have ulterior motives and they present it as the one and only solution. Yeah. For me personally, I feel it was mostly a vulgar display of power that opened the gate because everyone now said to be safe, I need a nuke. Yeah. So it became a race for power, which turns into a race to who will end the world first. Good point. Yep, all nations have a dark point. Unless the government suppress the truth, then limits what you expose. Yep. Targeted marketing is the entryway of targeting thought process. Exactly. It makes perfect sense and it's all mathematical. Technically, we don't have freedom of speech on a subject. If you're saying you're going to kill somebody or some group of people, you can get arrested. Well, and actually that sort of depends on there's a few things. I mean, in general, if you walk up to somebody and say, I'm going to kill you, technically you haven't done anything. And it's like, if you get a restraint, you cannot get a restraining order if somebody just verbally says something. They have to demonstrate something physically. But yeah, it's like yelling fire in a crowded theater. That was always the old example, which technically it used to be that it was illegal. People would say it was illegal. Technically, it is not illegal. It is ill advised. And anything that happens as a result of that, like if somebody gets hurt, they can sue you. So, I mean, even like shooting somebody, that depends. There have been cases like Louisiana is one of the states with Napoleonic law. And I lived there for a while. And what that means is you have the right to defend, even up to and including taking a life, to defend your property. And there was a case where a young man who was an exchange student, in fact, from Japan, he was a Japanese exchange student and he was going to a costume party and he was dressed as Elvis. And they had gotten him drunk and he was trying to find the house, and he went up to a house and he's drunk and he's pounding on the door because he thinks that's the right house. It's the wrong house. Well, the owner opened the door and shot him and killed him. And not only was the owner not charged, he got his gun back. And this kid who was just, and the thing is, because he was yelling, but the kid didn't really understand English that well. And, he was a transfer student. And so, that ended up, and I was just, it broke my heart because, and then they had to contact his parents had to come, and they just kind of said, they understand the law is the law. I mean, I would not have been that calm. I would have been, they would have had to jail me or sedate me. But they just kind of said, well, the law is the law. And they got their son's body and took him back to Japan. And the guy was not found guilty. He was not guilty of anything. And they gave him his gun back because under Napoleonic law, he was within his rights to take that boy's life. So, it's a thing. I have to show you in a DM. I believe Japan isn't really allowed to have a military. They have a small one. True. Well, they're not allowed to have a formal military. They do have a police force that acts as kind of sort of a military, but and that may even be subject to change. They may say, okay, it's been enough time, we're not doing this anymore. Sent a DM of what I was on about. I will go look at that. 4 American soldiers died in Iran. The oldest was 30 and the youngest was 19. Yeah, to be honest, the exact same situation would apply almost anywhere in the world. Yeah, I mean, there are some, you know, eh, regions, Napoleonic law. Oh, okay. Oh, it's a video. Let's see. Can we? Well, I'll check it out later because I don't want to play it like to where everybody hears it. It's horrible, but the owner technically didn't do anything wrong. If I was in that position, I'd probably do the same. A man is banging on your door and isn't listening to me. I'd probably be scared he's going to do something. Yeah. I mean, and the fact that, it was a teenage boy dressed as Elvis and, you know, saying something which was probably a mix of Japanese and English. And, that man had to live with the fact that he took a boy's life. And, I believe that there's a certain sentence that goes with that. And, and that's the thing. Had he known or had he paused long enough to realize that this was somebody who was not speaking English, had he looked out the window and seen it was someone dressed as Elvis, who was obviously drunk. And I mean, by the law, technically he did not do anything wrong. And it's just sad that had he waited, maybe that boy would still be alive. Maybe a mother and father wouldn't have had to come and collect the remains of their son, who probably was very excited about going to study in America, and convince them that he would be fine. You know, let's see. People rolling to your house is always scary. Yep. Time for some chicken Kievs. Ooh. I've never had that, but I've heard it's delicious. Make sure you put it in the recipes. Let's see. Oh, what do we have? Oh my goodness, we've got a picture from Kimmy Beans and Show and Tell. Look at that. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're gonna intensify. Ooh. Now that is cool. Oh my gosh. See, here it is so weird because I mean, it almost feels like fall. It is very this feel definitely feels like fall. And I don't, I don't mind the summer, but oh my god, it's been so muggy. And the other day we had a tornado warning, and which I didn't even know New York had tornadoes. That was absolutely new to me that New York had tornadoes. I mean, I know that some of you live in places that definitely have tornadoes, but the two things that I thought I would never have to deal with in New York, one was tornadoes, two was earthquakes. And I found out New York State actually has earthquakes. I mean, they're not the same as, like the ones we have. Let's see. Hearing most cases of self defense, most people hate themselves for it because most people don't want to take a life. Yeah. And you will always be looked at as that person who took a life. Some religious people came to my house and I wanted to play with these cats that come to my house, but I had to roll up to these dudes and be like, "Can I help you?" Keeping it 100, I would never trust someone that claimed they can't live with the fact they took a life. You bought the equipment fully knowing what it's for and you don't want it on your mind, then don't pack heat. You know what, Venomous? I see that. I honestly, I had never thought about it that way, but it does make sense. I honestly had never, you gave me something new to think about. I had never thought about it that way. I mean, that's why, like, in my house, we just had dogs. We had nice big dogs that were definitely, very, very loyal to us. But, I mean, yeah, technically. I mean, unless you're somebody who, like, if you have the weaponry because you hunt or something like that. But, yeah, I mean, that does make sense. And, it's I think that there's also a part of it that there is that kind of romanticized view of it a little bit. People are like, "Oh yeah, if this person does this, I'm going to do this and bang bang and pop pop and all this other stuff." I think that there is sort of a gap between the idea of doing something like, if you're going to defend yourself, defend your family. I mean, if it's the purge, it's the purge. And they recently had a case where two young men, they were literally breaking into this old woman's house. And I mean, she's like 80 something. And they were breaking in, they had masks on, they obviously meant to rob her. And she had a gun and she shot and she killed one of them. And then that kid's family tried to they wanted to sue her for like $1 million for killing this boy. And this was in Atlanta. And I believe Atlanta also has Napoleonic law. So she could not be held accountable for the death of this young man, even though they said, well, all he was going to do was rob you, which they don't know. I mean, you don't know that all they were going to do was rob her because people get into that situation. They start to, get a little crazy. Maybe they think she's trying to call for help and then they hurt her or kill her. So she had I mean, and the whole thing was on the ring cam, so there was no doubt about it. But the fact that the family wanted to try to sue her, it's like, how about you don't raise a kid who's going to try to break in and rob an old lady's house? So, it's rough. Most people don't want to kill, but they want something to defend themselves or their families, or, yeah, hunting. Yeah, she was just defending the tower. I think any and all death is horrible, even Hitler's, because I feel like we could have gotten information from, we could have used, and death isn't enough justice, in my opinion. I mean, and that is a thing that, the idea that when you have a situation where you've got a leader and they have inspired people underneath them to do things, it's like they never did the things themselves. They never did anything, but they inspired the people below them to. I mean, and that does get into a tricky thing. And there was a case where it was like with Charles Manson. The only reason Charles Manson was not put to death was because technically he never hurt anybody. He had his people do it and do horrific things, which is why he ended up in jail for life. But he himself never did anything other than motivate, other than inspire. And it's always that question of, it's like, okay, side note, I think Hitler most definitely deserved it. Yeah. My friends say they just need to be inside the house, and if they outside, drag them in, then call the cops. Which is weird because in California, which is, there was a while in California where everybody was suing everybody. And the trick was that instead of drag them in the house, they would you had to drag them out of the house. You had to say no, 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 they were outside the house, because if they're inside the house, that meant, and they had people who burglars who broke into houses who, one, he tripped on something and fell. He sued the owner successfully. He sued the owner of the house he broke into, and he was successful. I mean, he still went to jail, but he was successful. He won the suit, but then they were able to deny him payment because in the law, you cannot financially gain from your crime. It's like, the idea that you steal a bunch of stuff, you hide it, and then you go sell it afterwards. You go back to jail because technically you cannot financially gain from having committed a crime. So he won the case, but he wasn't awarded anything because of that fact. But the fact that he got it, and they've had cases where people like set up booby traps on their property or inside the house, like, that Home Alone type of thing, that kid would have gotten sued. Let's see. It's like that one kid who tried stealing wire from a car charging station and got killed via electrocution. Yep. Did you hear about the dude that tried to break into a house but got stuck in the garage? Yes. Legend says most of the time they can get you on real crimes, but tax evasion will always get you. That's how they got Jimmy Hoffa, how they got John Dillinger, these mega criminals. But nope, tax evasion. Well, just got to know the protocol for the area. Goes back to the whole just need to know the rules. Straight up, you just need to know the rules. Oh yeah, if someone breaks in and you don't kill them, they can sue and win. Yeah, booby traps are illegal. Yep. And it is, I find it fascinating how, when, like when I was little, in the ancient before times, um the idea of, what it was that you had to do, and the things that, because everything was based on what we were told. We had the morning newspaper, we had the evening paper, we had the 6 o'clock news, and we had the 11 o'clock news. That's how we learned everything. We didn't have, where you could go online and look up what's going on in Madagascar. Anything we knew about another country was either from a newsreel, which had to be approved by um, the government, or an encyclopedia that was 20 years out of date. And there was an interesting movie called Wag the Dog, and it was about this government group who went to a director, and they said, okay, we need the American people to believe that we're at war in this particular region because we need to build support for another action we want to do, a military action we want to do. So we have to claim that, our enemies attacked this little village. But they needed the director to completely create it, and he did. And it was an interesting study on, because most people left that movie wondering, wait a minute, is there other stuff I don't know about? When the wheel was almost totally round. I would not survive in the ancient before times. Oh, sure you would, Venomous. You would. I mean, it's interesting when you adapt. Would be cooked in no time. Yes. Oh, Fanta is a Nazi drink. They made it. What? Fanta? Really? Well, there were lots of things that were created by lots of people. The issue is I know my own personality. And the in like you would have probably done very well like when I was a kid. And like I mean, I was raised, both my parents had lived through the depression, the Great Depression. So it is, when you have like, the people who are forming your worldviews be people who, it was like, you never left anything on your plate. uh you know if you wanted so much as a nickel to go buy some candy, you had to sit through an hour-long lecture on the value of money. You never asked for money. You asked for a way to earn money. It's like, oh, can I do some extra chores for an increase on my allowance? Yes, the allowance. And so that was the mentality. We weren't given anything. You were told you had to earn every single thing you had. And back in my day, when you turned 18, you were out of the house. It was, in fact, one of my sister's friends, when they graduated high school, his parents, I kid you not, his parents gave him a set of luggage and his clothes were already in it. And he's like, uh, uh, my clothes are in the bags. They not only gave him the luggage, they packed it for him. And it was a thing where, you would break it when a kid turned 18, you took their plate and you broke it, which inspired my older brother to go find a metal plate that he always ate off of. So unfortunately, the Pharaoh would cook me. Oh, if you're talking about Pharaoh times. It's true, Doc, because when Coca-Cola during the war stopped sending resources over to the German Coca-Cola plants, they had to invent a new drink, which became Fanta. Ah, now, was that a German thing or was it a Nazi thing? See, there's a big difference, because if it were, not all the Germans and not all the German factories were Nazis, but in particular. But it's which, I mean, when you talk about anybody, I mean, Ford, you know, the guy who created the car empire, he was a huge fan of Hitler. He was a major fan of Hitler. So, it's like, okay, does that mean that all Ford vehicles are now nope, 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 nope. They wanted Coke and Coke wouldn't sell them and they tried to make their own and Fanta was the result. Can I watch an ad for more V-Bucks? Thanks. You can look it up. Yeah, no, I believe you. I believe you. And, when you think about like all the things that people are impacted, it was Nazi. Okay. But was the factory, because that's the thing. We cannot refer to everything German as, you know, as Nazi. Like my mom's friend. Just because she had a German accent, she was being threatened. People assumed that she was a Nazi, which she wasn't. And, it was, I can send you a video. No, no, I believe you that that was how it started. And, and even if, factories were under that regime, it'd be like, if everybody judged the United States and said, well, Americans do this and Americans do that, and Americans have done this, to judge every single American based on that worst case scenario historically. And, we've got a few. If every single American were judged based on that. And, it's like, Fanta, okay. It's sort of like what happened with Coors. Okay, Coors beer. There was a time when they were definitely supporters of racist groups, like white supremacist groups. And I mean they were very loud about it. And so black people were going Fine, we will not drink Coors. And Coors said, oh, well, who cares? Who cares if a few blacks don't want to drink our beer? We don't care. Well, in those days, they didn't have statistics. And Coors had no idea that the vast majority of the people who drank their beer were black. And it was a grassroots thing where black folks just stopped drinking Coors. And it became generational. I don't drink Coors. Have I ever had a Coors? I don't even know if I've ever had a Coors because it became a generational thing where it's like, no, we don't drink Coors. And then they started doing this major promotion, like it was in the 80s. They started like they put black people in their commercials. Every single Coors commercial had black people in it. And they're trying to like, oh yeah, we love black people and all this because they realized it's like, oh, you stepped in it now, didn't you? You didn't know that, but that sort of thing became a nope. And I'm sure Coors is definitely is, they're not racist or anything now, but there were multiple generations who would not drink it because of the fact that, and was it right? Was it wrong? We don't know. But it did send a message of the power of the consumers and that companies had to accept that you can't actually make fun of your consumers, especially if you don't know that the main group you're making fun of is the main group you depend on. And it almost shut the company down. So, it became a symbol. And we always have to be real careful when we pick something that is a symbol of something and then we create a story around it. And, it was, I mean, there have been lots of times when uh what was it? Some groups would say, it's like, oh, well, this particular product is representative of this particular group. And then it turns out that it wasn't even true. And, people's like, what? We didn't have anything to do with that. And, it's like after 9/11, anybody who appeared to be of Middle Eastern descent was targeted. When COVID came out, anyone of Asian descent, Japanese, Korean, Chinese, Filipino, Vietnamese, people who had nothing to do with anything, and yet they were getting stabbed in the streets. An old lady got stabbed because she was Asian looking. And it's like, okay, that is not all right. And it's an important thing to observe when people get stirred up and when people get very emotional and there are those who know exactly how to play into the emotions. When people can be stirred up and because once you become emotional, that rational part of your brain shuts down. Then it goes into mob mentality. Then people start doing things that they normally would not do, or that as an individual they would not do. And I've always found that fascinating, that how much of individuality goes away when suddenly, people start getting fired up about something and it's almost like this hive mind is created. I mean, literally, it's like the Borg. And they become one thought. And if that one thought is violence, and yet the most of these are people who under any other circumstances would not ever consider doing any of that. And I mean, we've seen it here repeatedly. We've seen it in other, it's happened in other nations where suddenly the mob mind takes over and individuality just completely disappears or seems to completely disappear. So, the study of humanity is a really cool thing in my mind because by looking at, the patterns, by looking at patterns of behavior, what is it? What is the tipping point that turns a group of disgruntled people into a focused violent mob? And then when that moment passes, and then you've got these people who are now back to being individuals who are having to deal with the consequences of actions that, and they may not even know why they did it. So, it's crazy. A lot of things are not very straightforward. True that. I know, but they had to regain control over the plants after the war. Well, yeah. I mean, it's like pretty much in any case. And the thing is that, the plants and, they were if what they were going to refuse, they were going to refuse the ruling body that they knew would kill them, would, you got to go along with it. People who, were building weapons and stuff and trying to, it's like, no, we've just got to survive. And survival was, like when any nation is at war, resources go down to almost nothing. Everybody in both the countries are suffering because all of the resources are going to support the war effort. So, you've got people who are, having really bad times, and all they're trying to do is survive. See, I kind of see it as like, okay, anybody who's into 40K Warhammer, I cannot see any single situation where a regular rank and file human being is in any way going to have a decent life. It's like, man, nobody. You could just be a regular old person and you're going to end up suffering just because of all this other stuff. It's like in the World Cup, England versus Argentina. After the match ended, they brought out Falkland flags. Not to, I meant, yeah. I Googled it and it says, yes, Fanta was originally created in Germany in 1940 by Coca Cola Deutschland. I Googled, did Nazis make Fanta? So it states that it was German. But again, not all Germans were Nazis. Nazi was a particular philosophy and you know, socio uh political group, but it wasn't it was a German company. So if it didn't say specifically that, it was that every person working in the factory, every rank and file person was a Nazi, probably not. The Jewish people right now, I heard one case of a man killing 2 Jewish people in broad daylight in front of a lot of people. Yep. We are the Borg. We all add your technological and biological distinctiveness to our own. It's fear, mostly fear of the unknown. True that. And being a Fanta drinker does not make you a commie supporter. It does not make you that. It does not make you a Nazi. Drinking vodka does not make you a communist. Uh, I mean, it really is because when we look at every, I cannot think of a nation that did not at some point have something that they were doing that really was not cool. And the bigger the nation, the more that comes out. And the interesting thing right now is that everybody has a chance to see it, which really is why I'm so optimistic about the future, because I'm tremendously optimistic about the future. I don't care what anybody says. I think that things are going to end up being really, really good, mainly because of the fact that young people now have access to basically almost the entirety of human knowledge. They also have access to observing other cultures, interacting with other cultures, of, learning and experiencing other ways of being that we never had. That wasn't something that was possible. And I think that probably added to the fact that my generation and the generations before that, we had a tendency to be a little bit trigger happy because we never got to know anybody. we never got to see what was going on in someplace else. We never understood. It was very easy to dehumanize because we had no way of knowing. And young people now do. And I think that that bodes very well for the future. I am very optimistic about the future because the kids on my school bus, they interact with each other. They do not, they're not like going at each other over race. They'll go at each other over console versus computer or, which tablet is best. They're all united that they think that most adults are dumb. But the thing is that they interact with each other in a very neutral way. It's not, well, you look different from me, so, you know, it's like, uh I think that my generation is probably the last one that didn't have access to global information readily because my sons had it. And it's because of that I know we're going to be all right. Okay, before we leave, we've got a flash from the past from Iron Eagle. All right. Random. Okay, we will leave off with a random photo. What do we got here? We will leave off with a random photo. Okay. Hold on. Okay, here's a fun one. Now, technically, I took this picture, but, I'm not in the picture, but I took the picture because and, when I first looked at it, the person with me started laughing, and I didn't understand why they were laughing. And when they pointed it out, okay. All right, hold on. Okay. And let me move myself so you guys can see it. Let me see who recognizes it. Now, this is a t-shirt that said recycle, reuse, renew, and rethink, which is fine. But if you look at cycle, use, new, think, read that word down. I'll wait. Anybody see it? Have a safe journey. Cycle, use, new, see you, and and I was thinking, it's like, wait a minute. Did somebody not edit this and at least one person go, wait a minute, what did we spell? And at only $5, you can't go wrong. Yes. $5 to walk around with a shirt that says CUNT, or as to put it nicely, see you next Tuesday. Alrighty, on that note, we are going to call it a day. But I have just been so, I love the fact that we can have these kind of conversations. Now I want that shirt. You can be insulting the world and everybody thinks you're being globally conscious. But I love the fact that we can have discussions like this because it's about sharing information, it's about learning other people's perspectives. Because the more we learn other people's perspectives, the more we can have our world be a little bit bigger. And that connection and being able to, you know, just just to be able to have new thoughts in our heads. And you guys have given me some really, very cool thoughts and things, I learn from you guys all the time, y'all. I use the term guys because I'm a boomer. We used it, guys, gals, and in between pals. So we'll say, or I'll just say y'all. But I learn from y'all all the time. And I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming in because believe me, there are not a lot of streams where the people in it can be so cool to have discussions like this and not everybody calling each other names and and all kinds of that it can be a discussion, that it can be about growing, that it can be about everybody stating an opinion, and everybody's opinion is their opinion and they have every right to it. And I'm so grateful that all of you are so mature about that and so able to embrace that. And we will be back tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel. And it'll be Friday. Thank God it's Friday. Today is Thursday, which I call Friday Eve. Is it Thursday or is it Wednesday? Hold on. Yes, it's Thursday. For a second, after a while, you start to lose track. But it is Thursday, yes. Anyway, everyone, please take care. And please remember that you are the only you in all the universe. You're the only you that's ever been and the only you that will ever be. And what that does is it makes you special. It makes you sacred. And most of all, it makes you necessary. Because as the only you in all the universe wouldn't be the same or complete without you. So, everyone, have an amazing morning, afternoon, evening, or night. May you walk gently with the world. May the world walk gently with you. And as always, I wish you balance and I wish you blessings from my heart to yours. So, have a good day. Learn something new. Ooh, burps. I'm proud of you. And I love you. All righty. Take care. We shall see you tomorrow. Bye.
Emerald Queen, where the gamers unite.